Hello, everybody. I am here today with Kevin, who is joining me to discuss the topic of Christian Universalism. And I believe, Kevin, did you say you're in Singapore?
Yes, I am. It's
So
12 hours from.
we are exactly 12 hours apart. Bless him for joining me on this. I appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead, Kevin, and turn it over to you to start with to introduce yourself and tell our audience what your thoughts are on Christian Universalism. And I'll jump in if you need me or want me.
Well, yeah, I'm Kevin. I am semi-anonymous on the Christian side of the internet. Um, I used to actively update a blog called the Atheist Christian Firebrand blog. If you Google, "Is God a sentient being?" I'm one of the first results. So, unfortunately, I haven't updated the blog since about 2023 or 4, um, when I started focusing a little bit more on living a good Christian life as I understood it, instead of just writing about it. Um, yeah, so we found each other on Reddit, on that Christian Universalism um, subreddit, and I think I do have a different angle when it comes to Christian Universalism. I think a little bit of my background would make some sense of this. So I grew up quite fundamentalist. Grew up in a Brethren church, less fundamentalist than the real hardliners over in the UK. But we did have the whole rapture thing before Left Behind was popular. So, of course, I was told from a very young age that, okay, because I'm Christian, I'm going to heaven. But my best friend in primary school, when I was about 8 or 9, my best friend would be going to an eternal hell if I didn't bring him to church. So that made a very big impression on me. Um, when I was 18, I left the church, and I had a quite a horrible experience where I lost my belief in God. We can look at that later if you want to. But from the ages of 18 till about, I was perhaps 20, I want to say 26, 27. Over that period of almost 10 years, I never really stopped reading the Bible. So I was a very angry atheist. I would, I really was. I would read the Old Testament with no like scholarly background. This is in 2002, 2003. I didn't have access to a theological library yet, and when I did, um, I just didn't know what to read. It was quite random. So I would read the Old Testament. I'll get very, very angry at it, to the point where I would take my Bible that I bought with my own money as an atheist because I wanted the NRSV Bible. I would take my own Bible that I bought with my own money. Well, I was not making a lot of money then. And I would physically stomp on it out of anger. And so I just kept on doing that, reading the Bible, getting angry at some bits of it. But of course, feeling like, yeah, some bits of the Bible are really nice. Like, um, I think even as an atheist, I really appreciated Job. When Job is railing and ranting at God and essentially doing everything but cursing God. And God comes out and says, "Yeah, my servant Job has said what is right." And so, as an atheist reading that, I'm like, okay, maybe I gotta get a different lens on the Bible and try to figure this out for myself. Um, so the experience was reading the Bible, feeling like I quite like parts of it, but I don't like the idea that people go to an eternal hell. And then I found Karen Armstrong. I think this was maybe when I was 28, 29. Karen Armstrong, The Case for God. And while I barely remember what she wrote about, I remember the theology that she visited in that book was not simple at all. Like there are so many kinds of theology of God beyond being, right? So even though I really didn't believe in God as um a being, like the top man in the sky, the top architect, I could get behind the idea of, yeah, maybe God is the ground of being, making everything possible. Sure, I could get behind that. I still couldn't get behind people spending eternity in hell. But I think, especially at that point in time, what had been a Buddhist meditation habit that I had slowly started to become waiting on the spirit again, which was a very strange kind of transition for me because I hadn't told myself in my head, I believe in God again. It was just I experienced the same kind of thing that I used to experience in church. Get a prompting, but of course, this time as a kind of atheist at this point of time, I'm like, that's my own brain that, of course, is going to speak to me in some different ways. Around this period of time, I also had to teach George Bernard Shaw's St. Joan of Arc play thing. And St. John in his play has this brilliant line of being accused of trusting her imagination as God's voice. And she says to the accuser, how else is God going to talk to me but through my imagination? And so I so loved that. Um, and you add all these things up. The last hurdle that I really couldn't get over um, in terms of calling myself a Christian was the question of hell. Richard Rohr's The Universal Christ then came out, um, and then David Bentley Hart's That All Shall Be Saved. And reading those two books made me realize, oh, that's it. That's the last bar that has come down. Um, and so it was that form of universalism that got me to think of myself as Christian again. Um, I've got a lot to say about Buddhism and my grandparents, but how's that for a beginning?
I think that sounds wonderful. And if we have time and want to, we can get into the Buddhism as well. But I want to stop for a minute and tell you it's funny. We've never met each other, by the way, everybody before today. Today's the first day we've actually seen each other in person, and we've only talked a little bit in Reddit. But our stories are similar. I didn't really spend many years as an atheist per se, but I spent a good chunk of my life what I call de-churched. I was brought up in a Catholic church and got turned off by a Catholic priest, went in search of all kinds of different religions, including Buddhism, Church of Scientology, everything else. Could never find anything that really made enough sense to me. So even though I didn't declare myself an atheist, I still thought I believed in God and believed in Jesus. I didn't believe in the church. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't believe in religion, and I stayed that way for many decades. The funny thing that I wanted to ask you about, and I know it's this case for me, and I wondered if it was really the case for you, even the time that I spent de-churched and the time that you spent as an atheist, it seems like there was something still in here that was still calling us back to explore and look deeper and learn more, because it wasn't that there really wasn't a God or Jesus there. It was that we had a misunderstanding of what or who he really was.
I want to be flippant and say, oh, it was just a trauma calling me. But I mean, in a way it was, but um, even though this is going to make me sound very, very Christian, it was God having me move through the trauma to arrive at a better understanding of what love is, what God is, who Jesus is, how to read the Bible, how to be in the world even. So was there something calling me? Uh, if I put it into words, it would really have to be, um, I think, very firmly becoming very fascinated with Jesus as a teenager. So, um, my childhood church was the kind of church where they would pray for people in our neighborhood to have what they would call felt needs. Um, what that is, if people didn't grow up in those circles, that's praying that non-Christians would fall into difficulty or poverty, things like that. So they would need help from the
Oh,
church, and we would be able to save them. Yes, so I would listen to those prayers and I would go, no, I don't think Jesus would like that, but I wasn't sure. So I made a point of reading the Gospels again as a 17, 18-year-old. And I'm like, "Bruh, Jesus is pretty cool. Jesus is pretty cool. Why is my church saying things that sound like the opposite of him? I mean, um, my childhood church is still filled with very sincere people. I mean, one of my youth leaders uh, passed away while being a missionary because of a motorcycle accident. So they really do practice what they preach. Unfortunately, what they preached back then, 20 years ago, was what we know as infernalism today. Um, so yeah, it was falling in love with Jesus, then somehow still having that love present I used to think of Jesus as this cool literary character. That's about it. And and yeah, I think it was that sustained it, my preoccupation with the Bible. I have been talking to a pretty conservative Christian recently, and they keep on pointing out that in the Bible there's this verse that goes, the scripture is alive, is good for teaching, for rebuke. I can't remember what it is. And when they cited that verse, I realized like, yeah, there was something very real, uh, both in me, in reality, and in the text of the Bible itself, that just kept me going with this.
absolutely. Hey, there's so much that rings with that. We could talk all day, and we won't do that. I promise people. But I think we could, and maybe we'll do a second session if necessary. But I know for me, reading the Bible has totally changed. Like you, I never stomped on the Bible, but I did read through it twice, where I just blew through it from cover to cover and went, I'm not getting anything here. That
Mm,
was back in my de-church days. But now when I read it and I try to read it with reflection. I try to put myself in there and I try to read it asking for guidance for what it really says upstairs. And I think it's important for all of us to remember that the Bible was transcribed, and at least in the U.S. versions, I think there's like 400 different versions of the Bible published. I mean, that's crazy. And there's 400 or 45,000 different denominations of Christianity. Talk about crazy. Now take any one denomination and any one transcription of the Bible and give it to 6 different preachers, and you're probably going to have 6 different sermons preached on what that actually says. So I think it's very important that we always keep that in context when we're reading the Bible. That, and thanks to people like David Bentley Hart and David Artman, we learned things like the fact that in the Bible, hell is referred to as that one word, hell. However, when you take it back to the original Greek and Hebrew text, we find out there was actually like four different phrases that they used that we all just combined and called hell. And depending on how you translate that original Greek and Hebrew, none of it says infernalism, as you
Mm,
said. So,
yeah.
so I think that's important for people to discover and really dig in if they want to see what Christian Universalism is saying. And the other thing I thought was interesting, you said I know this is going to make me sound like a Christian, and I thought, isn't that the case? When we say that, it's got to be such a negative thing. Oh, don't think of me as a Christian. Oh, please, Lord, don't do that. Well, and
Yeah.
it's there's a good reason for it because there's people out there that bang their Bible on your head and shout
Yeah.
infernalism at you, and you're going to hell and all kinds of other stuff. So there's a good reason why a lot of us seem to be embarrassed. But isn't that a shame? Because as you stated, look to Jesus, look to what he taught
Mm,
us. And when they tried to catch him and trick him, what's the greatest commandment of all? What did he say? He said it's to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, body, and strength, and to love each other in the same way. And all the
so
other prophets and laws hang on that. It's that simple. Love each other. So when we love each other, does that mean that a non-believer is going to hell? I don't think so. Not when you believe in love. Does it mean a Buddhist is going to hell? No, I don't think so. Not in my opinion. I don't know about yours, Kevin. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but
I have um I have such an opinion about Buddhism and Christianity in Singapore. I mean, um my
share a
my
little of it
father,
with us.
yeah, my father's father, um whom I've never met. As far as the family, the extended family knows, my father's father was quite well educated for a Singaporean Chinese man in the what is this 1930s and 40s. This was fairly rare. So as far as everyone knew, he was a Christian. What kind of Christian, we have no idea. Um, but upon his death, his will very, very clearly stated that his ashes would have to be kept at a certain Buddhist lodge in our country, and under no circumstances could his ashes be moved from that Buddhist lodge. He made it very clear. It's as if he knew that my country was going to move further and further into Christianity, and it would be the kind that uh, would be very afraid of hell. It's as if he knew that. Otherwise, why mention the thing about his ashes? So yeah, I find it so fascinating that even though most of my extended family on my father's side is Christian, to visit the patriarch of the family, uh, to visit his ashes, I would have to go to the Buddhist lodge. And then on my mom's side, when her father died, um, yeah, I expected her to cry. As a kid, I, I 7, 8, or 9 around there, and I remember thinking, okay, she's cried, but she's crying a lot. So I asked her uh as a kid, why are you crying? And she didn't respond at first, and then I realized, maybe she's crying because she doesn't know where grandpa is. So I asked her, do you think grandpa is in heaven? And she said, I don't know. And so, yeah, what a horrible thought for a daughter to have to entertain. Very, very paradoxically, it was then the Dalai Lama, one of his books, but maybe a few of his books, where he kept on saying that learning about Buddhism is good, but if you have Christianity in your heritage, then it's probably better to be Christian. Can
Oh, I
learn
did
from.
not realize that.
Yeah, so hopefully I'm not misquoting him, but it was that idea that made me think, yeah, maybe to be a good Buddhist, because I'm a horrible Buddhist. To put yeah, to put things into context, I don't even dare to visit a Buddhist temple in my country, not because they are not nice or it's scary. I don't dare to visit Buddhist temples in my country because um, I just don't know how to speak to them. Like I do speak English and Chinese, but I just don't know how to talk about Buddhism with people who like live in temples and serve in temples. So to this day, I haven't stepped into a Buddhist temple as beyond like as a tourist. So yeah, to be a good Buddhist, I just realized yeah, I'm reading all these Western English books about Buddhism, and like if I'm truthful with myself, in my DNA, I'm more Christian because my that's the way my parents brought me up. Yeah, so it was like when we talk about universalism, isn't it amazing that for a conservative Christian looking at my life, they would be able to say, "Oh, so God used Buddhism to bring you back to Him." And isn't that a God who saves everyone? I think it is.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. I agree, Kevin. And I think, it just, it stands to reason to me. I mean, it's just like when I started questioning religion, I couldn't question God because I look out at everything around us and how perfectly everything was made and interacts with each other. I just can't come up with anything that makes any sense other than there being a God. And for the same reason, my wife has always been a Christian Universalist and didn't know it. She didn't know there was a name for it. She just always believed everybody was going to heaven. That's what she always believed. And I always thought, well, that's nice that you believe that, but that's not what I believe. We got to accept Jesus, and you got to do it before you die, or you're going to go to hell, and it's going to be hell. So she's always been one who didn't know it. And that's the other thing, I guess, is where I'm headed, is saying that only makes sense too. How could a God who created all this and made everything work so well, interacting with each other, the miracle of birth alone, how could such a God, knowing ahead of time, is going to pick and choose? Some of us are going to heaven and some of us are going to hell because we didn't follow the rules exactly the right way. That just doesn't make sense to me. Now, an all-loving God that says eventually you're all going to end up back home with me. You're all going to take different paths. Some of you may suffer more on earth. Some of you may suffer more after. Some of you may suffer very little because you're all choosing your path because I gave you free will. But you're not going to end up in eternal hell. I won't let that happen. You're going to end up back with me. That makes more sense to me. That makes everything make perfect sense. For me, in my humble opinion.
And I think it's not an accident that there is a Buddhist version of hell where people do have to work out what they have done on Earth. So it's a tourist attraction in several Buddhist countries where you can go and see these representations of hell. So, for example, if you were some kind of pervert rapist in your life, hell for you might be I don't know, having to drink poison from the breasts of naked women or something like that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it is, of course, that universal human urge of like we all look for justice.
Yeah.
And how nice it is that in Christian universalism, God's love is God's justice.
Amen. Nice look on it, Kevin. Excellent. Yeah, it's funny. Have you ever listened to anybody that had a near-death experience?
I read with great interest Ibn Alexander's book. Have you had a near-death experience?
Not me personally, but I found
Oh,
this guy online who I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll send you in Reddit, I'll send you his name when I find it,
mm,
who I think he said he interviewed 1,000 people who had near-death experience, and he's on YouTube. He's got these interviews he does with them, and a lot of them claim they went to heaven during their near-death experience, or what they believe now is heaven, and they all say a lot of things in common. One of the things in common is a love that they felt when they were there that was
mm,
like nothing they could explain that they ever experienced in earthly love, which I thought was kind of unique, that all these people experience that same and describe it in about the same way. The other was that they felt like they were home and they
mm.
didn't want to leave. They didn't want to come back, even though they were getting sent back. It's like, no, I want to stay here. This is home, and this is where the love is. I meant to be here. And I thought that was interesting. And then there were several, not as many, but some that experienced going to hell at their near-death experience. And that was different kinds of experiences, but they were all not very anything you'd want to ever experience. But a lot of them, at that point, one of them said he reached out for God even though he doesn't know why or why he even said God. Another one asked for Jesus. He couldn't tell you why because he wasn't really a Christian. Some of these people were atheists, and he'd see this little light coming towards him, and it would get better, and then it would embrace him and take him out of this hellish place. And four of those atheists who had those near-death experiences are now preachers. How about that? So,
Very nice.
yeah, I think there's something to be learned from those near-death experiences. And then the other thing I thought was interesting was I've lately been reading up on the Gnostic Gospels. Have you ever heard of those? It's spelled Gnost. Yeah, they were buried, not included in the Bible, and not even discovered until 1945.
Mm,
And one of the things that hit me in there that I thought was extremely interesting was that, according to the Gnostic scriptures, one of the disciples had a vision where he was with Jesus and they were looking at a vision of him being crucified on the cross, and he was laughing. And he's like, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "Because people don't realize that's not me. I'm the real me. That's not me hanging there on that cross." And it just kind of puts things into context again for me. No matter how long, if you live to be 120 on this earth, which is unheard of anymore, if you believe in eternity, that's a spit in the bucket.
yeah,
It's nothing. And if you believe in God and Christianity, then you know there's a real you inside of you that has nothing to do with what you and I look like to each other and
mm,
what we are on this earth. The real us is inside of us. It's the soul. So
mm.
I've rambled enough. I
Well,
think I'm going to give you a chance to wrap up anything you want to wrap it up with. But I am going to wrap it up just because I don't want to keep it too long, and I actually have a doctor's appointment I got to get to today, so I don't want to run too late for that either. But Kevin, I got to tell you, it has been a true joy having you agree to do this. I don't know if you're aware, but it's a scary thing for a lot of people, so a lot of people won't do it because they just don't want to stick their neck out and be seen and talk, and I applaud you for doing that. I also pray and believe that you're going to have a real positive effect on some people. I had talked with some atheists at length before I became a Universalist. I wish I had had that belief when I talked to them before, and I hope the one guy I'm thinking of hears your journey and it helps him, because I don't believe as an atheist he's a very happy person. And I do believe if he could adopt some Universalist views, he could maybe wrap his head around Christianity again and end up a happier person. So I hope you not only help him, but many other people who happen to see this.
mm,
I'll send you a link of the video once I get it trimmed up and published.
yeah.
But how do you want to close it out? Anything you want people to know?
I think it'll be good to close on that near-death experience note, and maybe even if people are allergic to Christianity. I think near-death experiences are common enough that at the very least, near-death experiences should open us up to the possibility of mystery, even if it's all brain-based, even if it's all in our biology, which I don't believe. I'm more of a, I think panpsychism looks reasonable, but even if it were all purely in our brains, what amazing brains that would be. Why do we have that? That at the very least should open us up to a sense of mystery that we can't go like, oh, my consciousness is only brain-based. If it were only brain-based, I don't know, I don't have the words to say how amazing that would be.
Exactly. It's hard to put into words, isn't it? You did an excellent job, though. I think you summarized that excellent. And Kevin, again, I thank you so much for your time and your willingness to do this. And if you're open to it and want to, we can always do version 2.
Yeah, and thank you for putting this in the public. I think more people need to hear about it.
Absolutely, I agree. Have a blessed day, Kevin, and I'll be in touch
Yeah.
soon.
All right. Bye.